Hello and welcome to this short video on collecting data on the physical factor. Today we're going to look at the Bleep test and we're going to apply all 4 command words for higher PE to this. We're going to look at how to describe the Bleep test, how to explain why it was suitable or why we might use it. We're going to explain possible challenges associated with this test, and then we're going to look at evaluate and analyse command words as well. So on screen here you can see a picture of the Bleep test, and you can also see a picture of national norms. Hopefully at some point during your higher PE course you'll have had a chance to complete a Bleep test or a multi-stage fitness test, and you'll be well versed of what it looks like. But for those of you that haven't, it's a test which is carried out over 15 or 20 metres with 2 sets of cones. You also have a speaker and a soundtrack with the Bleep test app on it. Now this test is known as a recognised test. It's completed all across the world, and it has national norms associated with it where you can benchmark your progress, whether you're male or female, against people of a similar age. And it's used to collect data on the physical factor, and in particular it tells us about our VO2 max or our level of CRE, which stands for cardiorespiratory endurance. Here are some notes on the Bleep test. It may be a good idea if you're revising to pause just now and look over these. So as I said, it's 20 metres apart. We're going to measure that distance with a measuring tape or a trundle wheel. You're going to need the Bleep test app or an iPad and a Bluetooth speaker. You also need someone to observe you. This could be a partner or it could be a coach. And what we're going to do here is run as part of a group to try and help motivate us. When the first beep goes, you leave that line and you run to the other side. When the next beep goes, you run back to the other side, and so on. The beeps get closer together, they get quicker as it moves through the levels, and if you miss 2 beeps in a row, then you are out. At the end of the test, you'll get a score, 10.1, 11.3, 12.2, etc., and you can then compare that score to national norms, or you can use it to set some goals. So a very common question in your higher PE exam would be to describe a method used to collect information on the physical factor. You can see here that describe, highlighted in orange, is our command word. Collecting information tells us about data to do with data collection or gathering data, so it's a question based around testing. And the physical factor here tells us which factor we need to relate our answer to. You could write about other things here, such as the profile wheel or the general observation schedule, but for this video we're going to focus on the Bleep test. Remember, when it's a describe question, we want to give details to the marker about who the test was carried out, where it was carried out, what you did, what you set up, and then most importantly, how this test is carried out. And here are some common questions that you would want to include in your describe answer. On screen just now is a sample answer. Feel free to pause the video here and have a look at that. Okay, the next command word that we're going to look at is explain. So in your higher PE exam, you may be asked to explain why you use this method, or asked why this question is suitable or reliable. And these 2 questions are exactly the same. Later in this video, we're going to look at some challenges associated with this method of data collection. And in that particular question, we're looking at what might make the information which you collect invalid or unreliable. On screen just now are 3 very common exam questions. Usually this would come as part of a bundle, so the first part would ask you to describe the method like we've just looked at, and then the second part here would be asking you to explain. Remember, for explain, if it's 3 marks, we need to give 3 developed points of explanation. If it's 2 marks, 2 different reasons for, and so on. So if we look at the top question, explain the suitability of the method described in part A. Explain why you selected this method, or explain the appropriateness of this method. And here we're looking for 3 reasons why we might use a Bleep test. And these would be things like what you can see here. So we might use a Bleep test to find out our stamina level, and then so we can go and create a training program to improve that specific weakness. It may be that we want to keep this method as a permanent record, so that we can keep this and compare back to it throughout our program to see if our CRE is improving, and if we're improving on that weakness. It may be that we want to complete it with a coach watching so that we know our data collection is accurate or reliable, and that would be relevant for the question about its suitability. We want to use this method as it allows us to set goals and targets. As we get a score, we can then go and set short and long-term targets, which will help with our motivation and confidence levels throughout our PDP. We also want to use this method as we can compare ourselves to a model performer. So as we looked at the start, we can compare ourselves to national norms, but we can also compare our score to that of a model performer. And lastly, as we measure out the distance between the cones, we know that this is a fair and accurate reflection of our CRE level. So at the top here is a sample question, and then a developed answer here using the point, example, and explain structure. So this particular response has said a reason why the Bleep test is suitable, as it allows me to collect information on physical factors as I can keep it as a permanent record. For example, I complete the Bleep test in week 1 of my programme, and I can use this as a baseline test to compare back to. It may also be good there to give an example. So for example, in week 1 I scored 7.1, and then at my retest in the middle or at the end I scored 8.1 or 8.3, and you can give a comparison of results. This means that I can keep my Bleep test and compare back to it during my PDP to see if my training's working and to see if I'm improving on my weakness, allowing me to track my progress throughout my PDP. On screen here is a full response. I realise that text is quite small, so possibly a good opportunity here for you to pause the video and look at a full response. Again, here you can see a developed answer of one mark. So explain the challenges you faced when using this method, the Bleep test, when collecting accurate or reliable information on physical factors. So here you can see, again, using the point, example and explain structure. The challenge I faced when completing the Bleep test was not completing it with others. For example, I completed this test on my own and didn't run as part of a group. This meant that as I got tired, I dropped out, as there was nobody else to compete against me and motivate me. This meant that my score was lower and not a true/accurate reflection of my CRE level. So coming back to how it affected the data there in our answer. And again, on screen here, you can see a full 3-mark response. Making a clear judgment. This is what a question might look like. So evaluate how effective this method was for collecting data on physical factors. Again, if it's 3 marks, we want to give 3 points of evaluation. And I would probably encourage you here to write about positives and also negatives. So what are the benefits and what are the limitations? Trying to maybe think about 2 things that are effective and 1 that is ineffective. On the left-hand side here, you can see some things which are effective about this test. So it allows me to see if my CRE is a strength or weakness. I can keep it as a permanent record. I'm observed by a coach. I can set goals and targets. I can compare myself to norms. And again, the distance is measured between the cones. So some overlap there, some crossover about some of the positives compared to our previous answer. Ineffective, so it's ineffective if you don't try your best, if you don't put in your best effort. It's ineffective if you don't measure out the cones and if you don't keep your initial results. You could also mention there about completing it on a wet or damp surface as a thing that would be ineffective. So lastly, moving on to a response here. So the Bleep test is an effective method to collect data on physical factors as it allows me to keep this method as a permanent record. For example, I completed one in week 1 and I can use this as a baseline to compare back to. This allows me to compare back to my PDP to see if I am improving and if I am needing to continue to work on my weakness. If you pause the video here, you can have a look at response 2 and 3. Right, lastly, moving on to the Analyse command word, a very difficult command word. What you're looking to do here is go into the really specific and minute details about something, and in this case, you would want to think about the details and what's going to make this method effective or suitable. To answer this question, we want to use the 3I structure, so we want to identify something, and I would like you to start your response with, it is important when completing a Bleep test that, and then you identify a specific thing. You then give the implication, so what does that mean? Why would this be important? And then we're going to try and link that back to our data which we have collected. Again, here would be a sample exam style question, so analyse how effective this method was for collecting data on physical. So some points of analysis that you may want to use in your answer, in part 1 of your answer. Again, I'll ask you to pause the video here so you can look at these in more detail or take some notes. It is important when completing a Bleep test that you complete it with an observer watching, and you would then have to give the this means and the this leads to. It's important when you complete a Bleep test that you complete it with other people. It's important that you keep your score somewhere safe, and it's important that you measure the distance between the codes. If we just look at the top response together, so it is important when completing a Bleep test that you complete it with other people. What does that mean? Well, this means that I'm motivated to push myself and keep up with others, especially when I start to get tired. This leads to me putting in my best effort and gathering reliable data, which is an accurate reflection of my CRE level. Again, I'll ask you to pause the video here and look at those responses in more detail. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this useful. There's more content like this on my YouTube channel.